Good morning. What's up? Forgiveness is up. Yeah, we're this month. Our theme is Wisdom Walk, and we're using the book by the same title to guide us through faith traditions of the world, 9 practices for creating peace and balance in the world. We began 2 weeks ago with Islam and looked at the idea of surrendering more completely to prayer 5 times a day, and we talked about how we might do that in a similar way in our own faith tradition. And I'm so interested to know if you yourself tried that. Did you practice doing spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer 5 times a day? If you did, I sure want to hear about it, because I'm telling you, that is a transformative experience. It really is. And if you missed it and you're wondering what I'm talking about, you can still catch up by going to our website at www.cslsr.org, where all of our videos are there free to review. And you can get the book of the month, because each chapter has got exercises that are easy to adapt and use for yourself to integrate these spiritual traditions. Then the second week was Taoism, going with the flow, with Reverend Kim Kaiser. His video is up too. Wonderful. Just beautiful stuff. And then next week, Rabbi George Gittleman is coming to talk to us about the Jewish tradition of New Year and the spiritual internal process of preparing and cleaning out that people do to prepare for that Jewish New Year. He's going to follow up with a workshop, and I think the date of it is August 27th. And he said, for his workshop, it's called New Year Now. It's something you can do at any time. And he said it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not Jewish, or you know something about Judaism or you don't know anything about Judaism. Come to the workshop, and he says he's going to teach you about that process of internal preparation for renewal that you can use in your own life. So that's coming up next weekend. I'm going to be here. I wouldn't miss the rabbi for anything. I call him my rabbi. You know, rabbi means teacher. He's my rabbi. I've learned so much from Rabbi George Gittleman. So that brings us to this week, and it's Christianity. Christianity and the practice of forgiveness. And as you heard from the announcement, if you're stimulated by the idea of forgiveness, today's a great day, because Sayota Bell is doing that workshop on the ancient practice of Hawaiian forgiveness through prayer and song and chanting. Very lovely. So that's a gentle way that you can approach the subject. That's this afternoon, August 16th. So if you've been reading this book, Wisdom Walk, you know that the author borrowed from these faith traditions, these different practices, as a way of navigating through her own difficult time in her life when her marriage was crumbling and she no longer had a reference for how to be in the world. So she borrowed different traditions to help her in her journey. And one of the things that shows up when marriages crumble, or when relationships dissolve, or when careers come to an end, is this thing of betrayal and forgiveness. Often has to be dealt with. It's often a part of the changes of life. And what I appreciate so very much about the author is that she acknowledges, right, the advanced nature of doing forgiveness work. You know, it's not something to be taken lightly. And she acknowledges that it's really advisable to work with someone who's skilled at guiding a person through the rough terrain of forgiveness. It's not the sort of thing you just kind of tough it through, you know, push through it to the other end. And part of the difficulty of forgiveness work is because it's disorienting, because it's not linear. In other words, it doesn't flow logically. It's not like you can tell when and how it's going to be complete. I mean, you can set out with a schedule and a plan, but you better be ready for some surprises. You know, there have been times that I've done all the forgiveness work. You know, I've read the book, I've set the plan, and seemingly got nowhere. In fact, got worse. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? You know, and feeling progressively less spiritual as I go along. Do you know what I'm talking about? So I get to a point where I'm just so frustrated that I'm not feeling any of the joy, and I just got to walk away from it. And I just kind of resigned myself to thinking, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what it's supposed to feel like. I don't even know what to do. And just walk away. Only to realize years later that something happened. Because I look at it and said, oh, there's no charge. What happened? And I think what happened was that I planted the seeds. It didn't feel good when I was doing it. It was working, just not on my schedule. And just not the way I expected it to show up. In fact, I had to walk away after planting the seeds. The most reliable thing I can say about forgiveness is that it's like a cat. It can't be forced. It has to be courted. Yeah? And then when enough of the necessary softening has taken place in us to the point where we are defenseless, then it comes. That's when it comes. And I've also learned with forgiveness work that it's not always appropriate. It's certainly not appropriate to just push through with it all the time. There are times when forgiveness practices may even cause more harm than good. Take, for example, the situation when women are abused physically or raped. It's inappropriate to add additional brutality by insisting upon forgiveness work. That's not the time. No, not at all. The only thing appropriate there is love. Absolutely. I'm very pleased that we're looking at forgiveness through the filter of Christianity this month, because it's where I learned so much about forgiveness through the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. And some of it ambiguous and some of it confusing, which matches the complex, ambiguous nature of the subject. So we might as well jump right in with his words from Luke 17, 3 and 4. And I'll paraphrase it as we go along. If somebody makes a mistake, a transgression against you, then speak up about it, address it, reprimand them even, and if they say they are sorry, forgive them. And then if they do it again 7 times in a day, and then 7 times in that day they come back to you and say, I'm sorry, you must forgive them. Well, that's not ambiguous at all. I mean, forgiveness then from a Christian perspective is given on the condition of being remorseful, and it's mandatory. If they're sorry, and you are a follower of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, then you must forgive them. Wow. That's intense. It's quite a commitment to be a Christian. I mean, look, if they are sincerely sorry, it doesn't really matter what faith tradition you are. It just makes it easier. It makes the process easier if they are sorry. I mean, sorry doesn't always rebuild trust back up immediately. I mean, that takes time. But sorry helps. The problem with waiting for people to be sorry is that it doesn't always come. Then what do? Then there's this thing, this resentment, and there's the problem. See, it's getting complicated now. So forgiveness on one hand is conditional, and on the other hand it's unconditional. By that I mean it's conditional in that it must be given when remorse is expressed. And it's unconditional in that it is always permanently available to anyone who is remorseful. It's never withheld. Speaking on a divine love plane. Another way of saying it is divine love extends the possibility of forgiveness eternally, unconditionally, but it must be sought after. That's the conditional part. It's not that divine love withholds it or holds anything against us. It's that we hold ourselves separate from the experience of divine love and oneness when we withhold or we don't seek reconciliation. So when we express remorse, we begin to set things in motion, set things right, and we access the availability of eternal divine forgiveness. It's a little different when you're dealing with people, right? Set aside the divine for one moment. You can desire to make reconciliation and say sorry, but sometimes that expression of sorry is not welcome. It's not wanted. Not allowed. It's complicated. Phew. What do you do? And what do you do if they're not sorry? Well, let's look again at Jesus' illustration from his last words when he was dying, just when he was being crucified. In Luke 23, it says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Now, what he's doing, obviously, a very important lesson from the teachings of Jesus. What he's doing here is called interceding. It's intercession. He's speaking up on behalf of those who are not sorry. That's what you do. That's the lesson. I mean, they stole his stuff and they gambled right in plain sight over his possessions. They stood and did nothing in the face of unjust actions, and they sneered at him. And he said, "Father, forgive them." It didn't say that he forgave them. Because in my mind, he recognized that in that moment, they did not know the truth of their being, that they were one with all life, and that which they were doing to him, they were also doing to themselves. And so that separation in their consciousness allowed them to commit atrocious acts. And because they didn't know the truth of their being, they deserved forgiveness, according to him. Whew. And have you ever been out of your mind? Have you ever forgot the truth of your being? Have you ever done anything and you looked back at it later and said, "Who was that? Who was that person?" I have. Oh, it's embarrassing. It's hard to admit and it's hard to say sorry because it was you doing it. You were just out of your mind. Oh. So I learned from this passage that there are times when it's being done to me that I might not immediately be able to forgive what happened. But here's the thing. Can I practice visualizing, asking for, wishing, wanting good for other people? See, take my mind off of forgiveness entirely and practice something else. Instead of wishing for their suffering. Because I learned that right here at the center. I learned about the self-destructive consequences of wishing downfall for other people. Because even if they deserved it, according to me, there are consequences on my own well-being. And Jesus' instructions in this regard was to pray for those who persecute us. And prayer in our center tradition means to mentally see them as whole, to not focus on the act, the offending act, but instead to focus on the life of God within them, which can accomplish what we cannot accomplish. See, here's something we might be able to learn from Christianity, because, some people would say that we metaphysicians, we suffer from the idea that we are the center of the universe. You know how it shows up? It's like, if something's going to be, it's up to me. I do everything. I am the center of the universe. If something's going to move, it's all about me. When in reality, there are some things in this world, like the task of forgiveness, that is sometimes superhumanly impossible to accomplish. Way beyond the ability of ordinary humans to do alone. Some Christians might say that the first step to forgiveness is to recognize that they cannot do it apart from Christ, who to them is infinite love, endlessly forgiving, and that ultimately their job is to get to that place where they acknowledge their powerlessness and let Christ's love in them do the forgiveness work through them. So their job is to accept Christ into their hearts, into their minds, into their entire beings, to saturate themselves with that contemplation. It's similar to us. Christ has a similar place. Christ to us is a symbol of what Jesus attained in consciousness, the unified consciousness of oneness, the idea of divine inheritance. It stands for the cosmic pattern of connectedness and wholeness. It is to us the symbol of divine love endlessly giving of itself. So we might say the same thing. Our job then is to accept all of that into our consciousness, into our heart, into our entire being, to focus on that, meditate on that, and let that Christ consciousness in us do what we humanly are not capable of doing. That which I cannot accomplish, Christ within can. Here it is expressed in the Jewish Testament of Isaiah, where it says, I, even I, am he who blots out and cancels your transgression for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins. The consciousness of the I am cannot remember the sin. Whew, now we got a problem. Because we do remember, don't we? And you know, for those who lost loved ones in the shooting in the first AME church in Charleston, and for the people who lost limbs in the Boston Marathon, I doubt that they will one day get amnesia and suddenly not remember their loved ones or their missing limbs or what happened. So what does this passage mean? How can we adapt it? See, I have to read it in a special way. I read it like this. And I won't hold it against you forever and ever and endlessly bring it up and refer to it when I want to put you down and make you feel bad. Have you ever done that? I have. Forgiven them, but made sure that they never forget. By referring to it, sometimes the look is enough, hinting about it over and over again, just to keep them aware that you know. So I've learned from Christianity and other sources too, but especially from Christianity, that if the offender asks for forgiveness, then it is to be granted. And at the same time, it seems it would be very dangerous to forget everything that happened. And yet at the same time, remembering does not mean using that memory like a weapon. Because what goes around comes around. So if I don't let it go, it doesn't go. So there's a connection between what I put out and what I experience. And we call that the law of reciprocity. And Jesus here addresses it in the middle of the prayer he gave to us, saying, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Forgive us our sins, our transgressions, our debts, as we do the forgiving. Oh, that's annoying. Because on one hand, we're learning that I can stay exactly where I am until remorse comes. And I would be justified, according to what I've learned, in not moving, on one hand. On the other hand, there's this catch-22 situation that says, and nothing moves until I do. It's all in that little word, as. Right in that moment where I move, where I forgive, that's when I set things in motion. This wasn't only difficult, it's not only difficult for us now, it was difficult for his students too. One of his students, in a beautiful way, asks him about it. In this version of the Bible called The Message, which is in contemporary paraphrased language, very beautiful, from Matthew, and it says, at that point, Peter got up the nerve to ask, "Master, how many times do I forgive a brother or sister who hurts me? 7? And Jesus replied, 7? Hardly. Try 70 times 7. Isn't that beautifully stated? You see, 70 times 7 is a symbol for infinitely until it's complete. Whoa. No, I'm telling you, it's a tough one. Being a Christian requires conviction. A conviction and a forgiving disposition and a reliance on prayer. It really does. And he talked about prayer. And he said about prayer that when you and I pray, and he was talking about that prayer, the Lord's Prayer that he gave, he said, when you and I pray, we shouldn't make a show of it. We should instead make it a private affair in our souls. And he said we shouldn't use vain repetitions. And in this context, vain means ineffective, superstitious, unproductive. Don't repeat words of forgiveness or prayer in a showy, superstitious way, but keep the prayer of forgiveness going 70 times 7. So he's really calling forth authenticity. Well, that's not easy either. We do use repetition at the center, not because we think more is better, but we use repetition to help us internalize ideas, to get it. For me, one of the most effective tools of forgiveness is to repeat the words of the Lord's Prayer without attachment to how, when, if forgiveness will come. More like surrendering to the words of the prayer, like in the style of the Islamic prayer we talked about 2 weeks ago, letting the words of it wash over us like cool, refreshing, life-bringing water. It's not linear. It's not logical, but it is transformative to do it. It reminds me of something in Wisdom Walk on page 89. See if I can find it. Here it is. There is sometimes a leap that takes place in the forgiveness process. We want to forgive, but it's an intellectual, not emotional process. For example, I knew it was a good idea to forgive my soon-to-be ex-husband, but I didn't know how. I felt guided to jump into the process and trust that something would happen. Lyra, an educator, counselor, and nurse practitioner, assisted hospital patients in their healing process by helping them practice the art of forgiveness. I tell clients to begin the forgiveness process even if they don't feel it is genuine at first. Jump in and act as if, saying, "I forgive so-and-so for such and such," because often that jump starts the process that eventually leads to a more authentic forgiveness practice. I totally get that. And I use the Lord's Prayer to jumpstart the process for me when I can't get there emotionally. So I use the Lord's Prayer to focus my attention not on the act of forgiveness, but on the act of identifying with divine love, to accept it into my consciousness, so it can do through me what I cannot do by myself. Jesus' instructions about the Lord's Prayer, he said, pray this way, like this. not necessarily repeating the exact words. And so what I did is, and it's something anybody can do for themselves, I took the prayer and I rewrote it line by line for myself. And I came up with this: infinite presence within. Your nature is wholeness and perfection. You are eternally present everywhere. And from within you guide me. For your ways are my ways. Infinite power within, my every need is contained within you. As I dwell on your nature, I am released from all previous errors, and I'm able to release the errors of others. With my mind centered on you, I am empowered to be all that I can be today, a worthy channel for good. I am strong and courageous through the power and to the glory of God, which is love. Amen. Today, I'm going to use the Lord's Prayer with you if you feel inclined to participate in its original words for our practice of jump-starting forgiveness. Perhaps you know the words from memory. Just in case, they're up here. This is the Catholic version, and you see it ends a little earlier than the Episcopal version. And when I say together, I invite you to say the words with me. If your eyes are closed, that's just fine. If you don't know the words, you can open your eyes to look up. And in between the prayer, I'm going to read to you from Ernest Holmes his words about inviting the Christ consciousness, the symbol of unified consciousness, to reside within us so that it can do for us what we cannot do by ourselves. So I invite you to breathe in, exhaling together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I am filled with the peace, strength, power, and decision of Spirit within. The life force of this Spirit flows freely, peacefully, and harmoniously through every atom of my body. I am complete and perfect now. The all-powerful mind of the indwelling Christ in me dissolves and dissipates from my mind all belief in indecision, anxiety, error, or discouragement. I dwell in the realm of peace. Together, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. The Spirit within me is in perfect rest. The center of my being is now quiet and poised, for I have let my inner spirit fill up with this consciousness of peace and stillness. With this word of prayer, I am relaxing in body and in mind so that divine tranquility can fill my thoughts. Together, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. My mind, through this prayer, now releases all sense of burden or strain. Centered in this consciousness, nothing can intrude and disturb my spiritual self. I feel and embrace this freedom and this safety. All plans, all ideas can wait. For right now, I am welcoming the working of divine wisdom through me. It is working through me to set right any mistakes if there are any. My mind is quiet, calm, and deeply still. All tension is being released as the great inner peace flows out through every nerve. My body is at rest, my mind is at rest, and my heart is open to the silence of spirit within. Together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from every evil. The great blessing of Spirit within is pouring through me now and establishing me in the ways of good. My good is all around, within me and around me. I feel secure by means of this prayer in knowing that the loving presence of Spirit is with me now and forever. So I can say, I am divinely guided. So I can let go of all problems. And I can know that Spirit within me is attending, inspiring, and guiding and directing me. As a result, a great quietness and calm floods over me. It is universal love within me. I am aware of it in me. I am aware of my oneness with it. And through this awareness, I feel I am richly blessed. Together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I invite you now to sit with me in a moment of quiet contemplation. And let the next breath you take be a little deeper than the one before. So that as you sigh out, we bring this time of prayer and contemplation to its close as we say together, and so it is.